just because it is interesting because you said there should be more work, but in terms of policy thrust, what adjustment should the economic managers be doing in terms of economic policies to affect Nigerians to tackle this issue of inflation, specifically that of food inflation?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, the CBN governor, and he has been saying this for a long time now, that the emphasis right now is to tackle inflation. But like we saw the presidency do in terms of addressing issue of taxation, setting up the tax panel that was led by Oyedele, and we've seen the outcome of that with the tax reform bill. So I think there always has to be that level of action when you say you want to do something. So yeah, we want to tackle inflation, but what is really the plan of action to tackle inflation? Because if I was in that position, I would be saying, what is the biggest cause of inflation in Nigeria? And most of our inflation is imported. I always do not want to reel out figures without backing it up with research. But you agree with me that a significant amount of the inflation that we are experiencing in Nigeria today is imported. Even most of the food we eat is imported. Most of the food. I go back to this, your nice suits that you're wearing. It's imported. Yeah.
You don't know that for sure, Ididion.
Yeah, so it's very important for, of course, we go back to local production now to see how we can support local production and just push a little bit backward on importation. This really is the way to go. Otherwise, like I said before, it's very easy for us to go back to 54%.
Okay, as we begin to round off now, I just need to get your opinion on how best you think we can address this structural inflation in terms of housing, transportation, and of course energy.
Yeah, that's a good question, Justin. Very critical component of our economy. And, energy is something that it's a problem that has almost become, it has been a perennial problem with Nigeria's economy. I think I've been on here before, and we talked about the issues with our power sector, and it goes back to the point that I made earlier. We've seen the privatization of power in terms of distribution and generation, but that gap in transmission is something that needs to be addressed. We're having far too many grid collapses. So these are issues that we don't just need theoretical answers to, but the kind of action that we saw the presidency take, because it was really a laudable initiative, if you ask me, and this is really the way to get things done. You want to do something, you put up, a panel, a committee, give them their terms of reference, give them, a target, give them a timeline to deliver, on the basis of what needs to be done going forward. So we haven't really seen that level of action. Most of what we've seen have been mostly theoretical, and we need to see that in the energy sector as well. Otherwise, these issues will continue. Then on housing is actually quite a very difficult problem for the government to solve right now, particularly because much of the problems that, let me say, property developers face today are problems that are deep-seated in our economy. So you have maybe in advanced economies, for instance, where you have in some states what they call rent control. Okay. Can you implement rent control in Nigeria? You can't, because the developer will say, listen, I used to buy building rod for 120,000 3 years ago. Now I'm buying it for 1.2 million. So how are you going to implement rent control? So yeah, that's why I said it's one of the most difficult problems that the government faces today. But the point I will make is this. I saw about maybe a couple of years ago, Lagos State government come together with Afriland Properties to try to see how it can partner in the direction of a structure somewhere in Ikoyi, follow more towards. Okay, so if we can have that level of partnership between the government and private developers, then I think that we are closer to solving that problem.
All right, thank you, Didion. We really have to go because we are out of time. We have been speaking with research analyst Edidion Ikpoto, and we have been talking about rebased CPI and the impact on inflation and all of that. Many thanks, Edidion, for your time on the show.
Thank you for having me, Justin.
All right, in my opinion, I would say that the rebasing just actually altered calculation as it is, but the main crises have not been erased. But I just hope that it will not be an excuse for policymakers to just downplay these figures and say that we are doing better. But then it is actually a call to action, for them to tackle in the immediacy all of these issues affecting Nigerians, and of course, so that we can actually have food in our stomachs and go to bed with both eyes closed. Many thanks to all of you who have sat back to watch the show for today. My name is Justin Akadonye. Many thanks for being there.
I will take you through this amazingness today.
Welcome to Plus Trending. I am Bukky November, your host, saying thank you for joining us on today's episode.
Welcome back. It's tea time on Plus TV Africa.
Practice makes perfect. I'm not perfect yet, but I'm a lot better than I used to be.
He's a king. He's entitled to marry 100 if he wants to.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize.
What you can see is the remaining of the tanker that exploded.
The suspect equally confessed. A 500 naira they collect them. If no talk, then go. I was pushed to the point that I had to start something not norm. And I'm a big risk taker and I enjoy doing things that nobody really does. I wanted something different from every other art form that has been pushed out there. I didn't have that fulfillment in what I was doing and I really wanted to express myself more as an artist, and I decided to resign and go into practicing art full time. I loved subjects that had illustrations or drawings in them. I just kept pushing it and went to the extent of studying art in school. So it's been art all my life for me. I try to conceptualize what I want to create in my head. Even in as much as scattered as it might be, I create it in my head first, then I put it on paper. I sketch, then I try to pick colors and I proceed to the main piece. A friend of mine told me like there's really nothing that could be achieved with graffiti here. The piece behind me is titled Bold Steps. So I'm just trying to put my own as an abstract journey of African fashion has come so far. The word there is Ikeakpa. Ikeakpa is a Bini word for movement. So we are it's just a movement, and we have the shoes here which shows the flow and the storm which the movement creates while working. I'm Osa 7. I'm an African urban artist and design consultant.
There are signs Afghanistan is emerging from the darkness. Recovering from 30 years of war and repression, with a new democracy in place. But the country is still under siege from within. War with Taliban insurgents threatens the nation's security. Corruption reaches into the highest levels of government. Addiction rates rise among women and children. And a booming multi-billion-dollar illegal drug trade continues to thrive.
The amount of cultivation in Afghanistan is scary. It's actually terrifying. No other country in the world has ever produced that much narcotics.
At the center of Afghanistan's crisis, a hardy, drought-resistant crop that joins poor farmers with criminals and extremists, while pushing the nation toward the brink of disaster. Under cover of darkness, somewhere along Afghanistan's eastern border with Pakistan, a farmer delivers his opium poppy crop to a local trafficker. Here begins a worldwide illegal narcotics revenue stream, one generating $4 billion a year in Afghanistan. Prior to 2002, opium cultivation was legal and highly profitable for farmers, returning up to 10 times more money per acre than other crops. The source for heroin, poppy became Afghanistan's most lucrative export. And it still is today. Cultivation has been banned since 2002, yet poppy still grows in regions of the country where the central government has little control. The international community, led by the US and Great Britain, has invested hundreds of millions of dollars to combat Afghanistan's drug trade, mainly because money from opium helps fuel the Taliban insurgency. But when US-trained Afghan eradication teams plow up poppy plants, like here in Helmand province, it's not always the criminals who pay the price. The United Nations sees Helmand as the center of the poppy trade, supplying over half the opium in the world. But many farmers here see poppy as a means of survival, and eradication by their own government a harsh punishment. Afghanistan's poppy problem began in 1973 with the overthrow of King Zahir Shah, whose family had ruled the country for 2 centuries. A series of political upheavals followed, orchestrated by the Soviet Union.
First of all, you have to know that the Russians spent 200 years trying to get control of Afghanistan because they wanted Afghanistan as the route to the Indian subcontinent and the sea.
The dreams of empire led the Soviets to invade Afghanistan in December 1979 and begin a brutal 10-year occupation.
روسانو په افغانستان کې ډېر بد خاطرې موږ داغونه لرو. افغانان په شهادت ورسول او ډېر افغانان مهاجر کړل د خپل ملک نه، ډېر افغانان معیوب کړل، ډېر افغانان وځورول ورته چې ژوندي د خاورو د لاندې کړل. نو موږ د هغې نه ډېرې سختې او بدې خاطرې لرو. ټول افغانان د هغې نه بدې خاطرې لري. د وروس د راتګ نه او تر وتو پورې د افغانستان خلک د وروس نه ډېر بدې خاطرې لري.
Throughout the 80s, Afghan fighters known as the Mujahideen battled endlessly to force a Soviet retreat.
منګه صرف خپل د علاقو نه د اسلام په نوم منګه خپل عقیدې په لحاظ نه دا جنګ کړی دی. منګه دوی سره کوم دغه نه لرو نو خو دا چې ما درته مخکې ویلي چې دوی زموږ په اسلام باندې تعرض وکړه، دا خو داسې تعرض نه و چې دوی یوازې په خاوره وکړو. دوی خو زموږ اسلام نه مانه، دوی خو موږ باندې هغه خپل سوسیالیستي چې دی که نه منل.
The Mujahideen resistance surprised the world. Soviet troops were forced out of Afghanistan in 1989, leaving a devastated land behind. They also left the country without a generation of leaders to move it forward.
Many of them were executed. They were simply thrown into prison. Some were tortured to death. Others were driven into exile to save their lives, and they're gone. So a whole generation of experienced leadership has been lost.
Lost, too, was the country's stable rural economy. 10 years of war left farmland ravaged or abandoned. Irrigation systems, livestock herds, roads, and markets were destroyed. Meanwhile, with few alternatives, desperate farmers turned to opium poppy cultivation for survival.
Before the Soviet invasion, there was really no cultivation or consumption of opium in Afghanistan to any commercial extent. It is only at the beginning of the 80s that Afghanistan started to develop the cultivation and abuse of opium.
The victory over the Soviet Union morphed during the 90s into a civil war among competing Mujahideen factions, each vying for control of the country. Opium became a reliable income-generating crop, not only for farmers, but for the rival forces who needed money to fund their military operations. The Taliban's rise to power in 1996 did not slow opium cultivation.
When the Taliban first appeared in Afghanistan, based on their religion, they took a stand against opium. But as they extended their control into more areas where opium poppy was grown, they found that it was not possible to retain control of the territory while attacking people's livelihoods. So instead, they ruled that while it was forbidden for Muslims to consume opium or to sell it to Muslims, in case of necessity, it was permissible to grow it or trade in it as long as it was not consumed by Muslims.
The Taliban's permissive policy caused annual opium yields to double between 1997 and 2000. Its leaders even used a one-year ban against cultivation to boost worldwide prices on the illegal market.
The Taliban is often credited with wiping out the poppy crop for 2001. That's well reported. What has not been well reported is that Mullah Omar stockpiled 300 tons of opium paste before eliminating the crop. And he was one of the #1 dealers in opium the entire time that he was posing for holy pictures with UN officials talking about the eradication effort.
Ouster of the Taliban in 2001 set the stage for a new democracy which outlawed opium. President Karzai made controlling poppy a top priority.
It destroys our economy. It destroys a good family life in Afghanistan, which is the most important thing to have in any country. And most important of all, drug production and trafficking goes hand in hand with terrorism.
In 2004, under great pressure from the US, President Karzai declared jihad against poppy and promised that in 2 years there won't be any poppy plant left in Afghanistan. Well, obviously, this has not materialized at all. There is more poppy in Afghanistan today than there has been at any point in Afghanistan's history. There is more poppy today in Afghanistan than there has been in the modern history of the drug trade.
That fact was underscored by the United Nations report in August 2007.
Afghanistan produces 92% of the world's illicit opium, so we have virtually a monopoly situation.
A monopoly that many believe makes Afghanistan a narco state.
It is not a narco state, but it does produce a lot of poppies. Afghanistan has the problem of poppies, and Afghanistan has the problem of the fight against terrorism. We're fighting both.
But the fight against poppy is not going well.
The amount of cultivation in Afghanistan is scary. It's actually terrifying. No other country in the world has ever produced that much narcotics.
Nor has any country in modern times exported as much narcotics. Getting the product to market starts with the sap from the opium bulb being harvested in the fields. Through a series of steps in secret labs, the sap can be processed into grades of heroin inside the country. Then it's sent out along one of 3 main trafficking routes: east into Pakistan, south and west into Pakistan and Iran, and north into the Central Asian states and Russia. With hundreds of miles of open frontier borders and thousands of people pouring across checkpoints each day, smuggling narcotics out of Afghanistan, while risky, is big business. The $4 billion Afghan opium generates internally grows to over $40 billion as it travels through the Middle East, across Europe, and into Great Britain. This is more than a money-making criminal enterprise. Intelligence reveals links between Afghan drug lords, traffickers, and Taliban insurgents who are paid to provide protection against government counter-narcotics efforts.
The Taliban has been one of the principal dealers in opium paste and in heroin. And we have seen the insurgency fueled by funding from the trade in drugs.
Estimates suggest as much as 40% of the Taliban's income derives from opium.
You look at a map of Afghanistan and see where the poppy is grown, and you look at a second map of Afghanistan to see where there's insecurity, it's the same map. Where there's poppy, there's insecurity. Where there's insecurity, there's poppy. And so what we're trying to do is adjust the strategy. We focus more on a closer coordinated counterinsurgency, counter-narcotics effort. We have to work more closely with the military to make sure those efforts are well coordinated.
Of Afghanistan's 32 provinces, 4 in the Taliban-controlled south produce 2/3 of the country's poppy crop. Signs of the Taliban are everywhere, like this abandoned compound in Kandahar province, where the plot for 9/11 was hatched. Today, it's a reminder of the tensions that still haunt this region. The U.S. military is in Afghanistan as part of a multinational NATO security force supporting the Karzai government and the Afghan National Army. Their mission is not rooting out drug dealers. Instead, they battle Taliban fighters funded in part by illegal narcotics.
If you do get attacked, it's going to be coming from pretty much anywhere.
U.S. Staff Sergeant Lucas Hearn is stationed here at Zabul Province Forward Observation Base in the south, the front lines where the fight against the Taliban is fiercest.
They'll do small arms attacks on us every once in a while. More often than not, though, we just get mortared from up on these ridge lines.
NATO soldiers aren't the only ones putting their lives on the line. Afghan National Police also provide backup by helping man the rugged hilltop posts overlooking the valley. It's dangerous work, trying to control a region that's known as a powder keg, but it's where the future of a nation may be decided. Combating the poppy trade requires a strong government capable of safeguarding its people and enforcing its laws. In 2004, the United States developed a 5-pillar counter-narcotics strategy to help Afghanistan's fledgling democracy rid the country of drugs.
Well, the 5-pillar plan is a combination of incentives and disincentives, and that's the only way to defeat a narcotics problem anywhere in the world. You have to offer farmers an alternative crop for poppy. You have to make sure there's something else they can grow. You have to have an education campaign that explains what poppy does. It's not just a beautiful flower that brings them money. It causes misery and harm in Afghanistan, around Afghanistan. And then there have to be law enforcement. Poppy is illegal in Afghanistan. People have to know there are consequences to growing it and trafficking in it.
Manual eradication is perhaps the most controversial part of the strategy.
The United Nations says that you need to eradicate about 20% of the poppy in a given area in order to deter planting the next year. The objective is not to lower the number of hectares under cultivation. The objective is to interject risk to the farmer. What keeps them from planting the next year is the fear of eradication.
But eradication can also be risky business for the government. On a dusty plateau in Oruzgan province, a joint U.S.-Afghan team prepares for an eradication in Tiran Kot, a Taliban stronghold.
This afternoon, explain some of your ideas. We agreed with the Dutch to start with, at least. We'd stay 6 and 7 west.
The operation has been coordinated with village elders and local government officials who've helped select the fields to be destroyed. General Mohammed Daoud, Deputy Minister of the Interior and a leader in the country's counter-narcotics effort, knows the Taliban threat here.
در بعضی ولسوالی‌های مثل چوره و چارچینو مشکلات امنیتی وجود داره. روزی گذشتم طالبان حمله کردند از پوسته ها که دوباره پوسته امروز پس گرفته شد.
Set for the mission, a convoy heads out, including a group of Americans who'll provide security. But soon, there's trouble.
Taliban. They are Taliban fighting. Yes.
With gunfire on all sides, the eradication team flees to safety, leaving the mission unfinished. And the Taliban still in control.
When forceful eradication takes place, the rural population is still fundamentally dependent on the illicit opium puppy economy. It alienates the population from the government and the peacekeeping forces and pushes it into the hands of the Taliban.
Many agree, including a British member of parliament.
If we want to win in Afghanistan, we have to win over the farmers. And in the short term, you do not do that by corruptly destroying their opium crop. You persuade them over time that it is better and possible for them to have alternative livelihoods, to make meaningful money doing something else. And you won't do that till you've got proper irrigation systems, till you've got decent roads, till you've got access to markets. All these things, they need to happen first. Just to, traipse in and, tractor over someone's fields is not the way to, endear yourself.
There's proof that alternative livelihood programs have worked to replace poppy cultivation. Projects for growing and exporting pomegranates and vegetables have been successful. But the challenge is making them profitable and sustainable for all farmers. Failing this can undermine the effort. Case in point, Nangarhar province near the Pakistan border. As late as 2004, Nangarhar was a top opium producer, second only to Helmand in the Taliban-controlled south. Then the government, with the help of the international community, declared war against poppy in the province. Along with eradication efforts, Cash for Work projects supported by the U.S. provided alternative sources of income for poppy farmers. Agricultural aid programs gave farmers an incentive to grow legal crops instead of opium. The result, cultivation in Nangarhar dropped by over 90% in a single year.
2005, Nangarhar saw a 90% decline in cultivation. And this was hailed as a major success of eradication and counter-narcotics policies in Afghanistan. Why was this success achieved? It was because both the willingness of the governor and police chief to arrest and imprison and shake up those who violated it, as well as lining up tribe leaders into persuading the population not to grow. And they did so by telling them that alternative livelihoods would come.
In the Shinwari district of Nangarhar province, Elder Dur Jan was one of the tribal leaders who supported the government ban against cultivating opium poppy. He convinced local farmers to stop growing it, based on the promise of alternative livelihood aid, and helped reduce cultivation levels to nearly zero. Himself a farmer, Durjan endured the financial sacrifice the ban imposed on growers.
دا شوتل زما د پسرلی د پسرلی زمونږ دا کارنده دا وطن دا ټول کمپاین شوی دوی نه هغه وړاندې ځای پورې.
This year, Durjan must again persuade farmers to refrain from growing poppy. But it's getting harder. Despite complying with the ban, people have seen little help in return. Making matters worse, a prolonged drought has gripped the region, leaving those wanting to believe in Afghanistan's future with a sense of futility.
ما خپل نظر دا دی چې دې ورونو ته مخکې ما ویلي چې افغانستان اوس په مثال د مریض دی. مریض یو مرض نه وي، زمونږ یو مرض نه دی، مونږ کې ټول مرضونه موجود دي. لوږه راکې موجود ده، بیکاري راکې موجود ده، مریضتیاوې راکې موجود دي، کلینیک نشته، مکتبونه هم شاړ دي، وطن هم شاړ دی، کاریزونه هم وچ دي.
Water for irrigation has been a particular problem in the district. Durjan sees proof of that everywhere. Since poppy plants can survive on rainwater alone and in drought-like conditions, Durjan fears farmers may resume cultivating it out of necessity.
مشکلات خو زمونږ همدغه مشکلات دي چې د خلک د نفس سره لاس په ګریوان دي. که یو بوټی کوکنارې کېده هغې باندې یو مشکل راپکېده. کوکنار د حکومت په ضد نه کوي، او کوکنار د نفس د خاطره کوي چې دوی د دې سره په مشکل اخته دي. خو مونږ به بیا هم دا کوشش کوو چې زمونږ رعیت، زمونږ عام خلک کوکنارو کروندونه ځانونه وساتي، ویې نه کوي. خو دا چې اوس حکومت خو هم دومره وکولی شي چې د دې خلکو سره خو هم یو څه وکړي، او هغه داسې څه نه چې موږ ته دا وړه چې ماته ایښي دي. دا اوس 4000 کورونه زه تقسیمولی شم، خو دا نه شم تقسیمولی. نو که داسې کومکونه موږ سره کوي، نه دي کوي.
In 2007, the Shinwari district returned to growing poppy.
The promises of alternative livelihoods never materialized for many. In some circumstances, household income crashed by more than 90%. People lost all productive assets. They were not able to meet basic subsistence. So it was not at all surprising, and in fact, arguably inevitable, that the population went back to cultivating poppy.
The failure of the government to deliver on promises has another drawback. It undermines the authority of the elders, like Durjan, who speak on its behalf.
Many of the tribal leaders who have participated in the eradication campaign have become discredited. The population is alienated from them, they no longer trust them, and this creates key opening for the Taliban to come into the province and to mobilize.
The return of high-yield cultivation to Nangarhar means more business and profits for the traffickers. Six months earlier, the farmer got an advance from the trafficker toward his future poppy crop. Providing credit is standard business practice and helps farmers make it through the winter. It also proves the value of opium, which generally returns 8 to 10 times more per acre than crops like wheat or rice. The trafficker comes from a long line of those who followed in their father's footsteps.
زمونږ دا کاروبار مونږ ته د ډیر پخوانه راپاتې دی، یعنې د خپل پلرونو نیکونو مونږ ته په دې سره خپل ژوند په مخ بیو. بل داسې کاروبار زمونږ دپاره نشته چې مونږ یې دې ځای کې په دې منطقه کې وکړو. مونږ دپاره په دې اندازه باندې مونږ ته کوم عاید لاسته راشي.
With the average income less than $400 a year, for many, trafficking makes economic sense, despite the risks. The opium's freshness is judged by touch. Soft and putty-like now, it will later dry out and harden in storage, becoming more concentrated.
ذمواریم تر اخره پورې ذمواریم چې په پیرو
اړول خاتمه زموږ په کاروبار باندې کې څلور ځکه چې څومره چې هلته کار کمیږي عمر زموږ دپاره عاید هم کمیږي موږ خو چېرته د قانون له حکومت د بدیل معاشیت ورکړي یعنې هغو دپاره داسې یو څه برابر کړي چې د دې کوکنارو او د دې اپین نه د هغو حاصل دې کې زیات شي او هغو ته زیاته ګټه پاتې شي نو حتما د کان په مجبوري کې چې د اپین په ځای باندې بل څه کاروبار یعنې بل کم فصل په خپله ځمکه باندې وکړي او هغې ته توجه وکړي نو خپله قاچاقبر مجبور دی چې اپین چې د کان ونه کوي نو قاچاقبر به د کم ځای نه لاسته راوړي.
Yet for the immediate future in Nangarhar, the trafficker's job is secure. At 2 a.m. in Badakhshan province, and the anti-narcotics police begin their operation. With the morning light, they arrive in a remote village. They've lost time and possibly the element of surprise. Colonel Amin Ali, head of the provincial anti-drug force, hurries with his team through the village. There's still far to go, and no certainty they'll find what they've come for. But the portable generator is a good sign. And further along the ravine, they find it, a makeshift heroin processing lab with 600 kilograms of opium ready to be processed into 75 kilograms of heroin. Wholesale value in neighboring Iran, $250,000. This time, the lab workers were tipped off and escaped, but not before converting the raw opium into a solid morphine base, the step before refining it further into heroin.
او آب انتقال میتن در این ظرف کلان آب باز میگیرن این بیلرایی را که شما میبینید در این بیلرا این آب جوش میتن بعد از اینکه این آب جوش آمد بعد از او در اینا باز همون تریاک میندازن.
The opium dissolves into a brown liquid and ultimately becomes the morphine base. It can later be processed into various grades of heroin for smoking or injecting. Given the remote location and difficulty of the terrain, Amin will have his men pour out the liquid here and destroy any remaining raw opium or bags of chemicals. This is the 11th lab Colonel Amin and his men have raided in Badakhshan during the last year. But it's too soon to declare a victory in the province's drug war. Police reports claim many other primitive heroin labs in Badakhshan. They exist because the big money's in processing.
The UN Office on Drugs and Crime has estimated in recent years that the farmers are getting from 20 to 30%, and that traffickers, corrupt officials, Taliban, and other participants in it, like people who make heroin out of opium, are getting the remaining 70 or 80%.
70 to 80% of a yearly $4 billion revenue stream is a staggering amount of money. The average per capita income in Afghanistan is under $400 a year. Few legal jobs can match the money earned in the drug trade. But efforts to stop trafficking have begun.
د هوایي ډګر د سرحدي پولیسو او د نورو نهادو ارګانونو په کومک سره بیا هم پولیسو امروز وکولی شول چې دوه کسان چې د افغانستان اوسېدونکي وو غوښتل چې د کمیر د الوتکې په ذریعه دوبۍ ته او د دوبۍ نه وروسته چین ته تقریبا په حدود 1200 کیلو هیروینو غوښتل چې د 2 بکسو کې چې ډېر په ماهرانه شکل سره ځای په ځای کړي وو غوښتل چې ولېږدوي بیا هم د بیدارو پولیسو لخوا د چک په وخت کې دستګیر.
Catching drug dealers and traffickers is only part of the mission of the police. They're also trying to revamp their country's tarnished image.
لکه څرنګه چې ګران هیوادوال په دې باندې پوهیږي چې میدان هوایي و هوایي دروازه ده د افغانستان د خلکو عزت او ابرو ده چې زموږ د نړۍ سره ارتباطات تامینوي.
The next stop for these men is a date in an Afghan court.
حضرت وزیر قضایی محترم آقای صاحب عبدالوهاب سدید و آقای صاحب عبدالظاهر سدید در مورد قضیه قاچاق مقدار 11.10 کیلوگرم تریاک با اتهام
Typically, defendants go to trial about 2 months after arrest. But they're not the only ones whose lives hang in the balance. Outside the courtroom, judges have been threatened, abducted, or killed for doing their job.
و هر آن ما چون با قاچاقبران مواد مخدر روبرو هستیم و این کلش مجرمین سازمان یافته هستند چون مسلک ما پیش ما مقدس است با آن هم ما وظیفه خود همونطور به حساب با مسئولیت و با عشق علاقه انجام میدیم. توقیفیت به مدت 10 سال حبس تنفیذی و به مبلغ 700,000 افغانی جریمه نقدی محکوم به مجازات نمودیم.
While justice should be blind, it's often the small-time growers and dealers who are put in jail, caught up in the interdiction campaign.
افغانان ټول په پوي دي موږ نه واخله تر تاسو پورې له تاسو واخله بیا تر حکومت دولت ریاست جمهوریت پورې ټول په خبر دي. هر هغه کسان چې دوی د قانون تشویقي اوس هم موجود دي په کابل کې موجود دي اعلان کې په وزارتو کې موجود دي په چارواکو کې په پولیسو چارواکو کې یا په وزارتي چارواکو کې دا وجود لري هم دا اوس هم ستا په پارلمان کې دا غړي دي د افغانستان هغوی دا تشویقي ورکوي خو هغه کسان دي چې هغوی لاسونه اوږده دي لوی قاچاقبران په ظاهرا آزاد ګرځي.
The problem with interdiction, the way it's been carried out, is that it has targeted small traders with little political clout who have not been able to prevent arrests, whereas big traffickers with important connections to the government have been able to avoid interdiction and arrest.
At the end of the day, if you want to have success in Afghanistan or any country in getting a handle on drug trafficking, then it is very important that the cases are built against the management, against the traffickers, against the mid-level and the high-level individuals. Those people, you have to get evidence against them. They have to be arrested. They have to be formally charged in a court of law. They have to be prosecuted, convicted, and put in prison.
One high-level drug lord that was arrested wasn't tried in Afghanistan. Instead, he was turned over to federal authorities in the United States.
Haji Baz Mohammed, who was extradited Friday, is one of the world's most wanted, most powerful, and most dangerous drug kingpins.
Baz Mohammed was the first defendant the Afghan government ever extradited for drug crimes.
He pled guilty to being a manager of a heroin transportation organization through which he moved heroin from Pakistan and Afghanistan to the U.S. from 1990 through 2005. From 1994 forward, he and his organization used some of the money from the sales of the heroin in the U.S. to support the Taliban in Afghanistan. And in exchange, they received the protection of the Taliban.
Mohammed was sentenced to over 15 years in a U.S. prison, a key judgment to Boyd Johnson.
But I think it does make a difference when you take out a person the stature of Baz Mohammed. You send a message to the people of Afghanistan and to the traffickers themselves that they're not above the law.
Johnson admits that Afghanistan's judicial system has a ways to go.
I think that the corruption in Afghanistan is a significant issue, and it's not going to take a week or even a year. It's going to take a long time.
Corruption is a serious, serious problem. The police are corrupted from time to time. Local government officials are corrupted. Provincial government officials sometimes are corrupted. So it's across the board. Unfortunately, this is becoming all too common in Afghanistan society in general, but it's certainly very much there in drugs.
Newspaper editor Shukriya Barakzai is one of the members of Afghanistan's new parliament, frustrated by the all too common wrongdoing she sees.
چون اگر فساد می‌بینین در اراکین دولتی موجود هست، قاچاق مواد مخدره می‌بینین موجود هست، گریز از حسابدهی موجود هست، گریز از عدالت موجود هست و از پشت میز محکمه خو معلوم داره که یادشم نامشان بگیرین اصلا امرایتان قبول نمیکنن. چطور من میتونم که پس همی توقع رو داشته باشم که خب بیا خیر است بیادر جان هرچی که بود تیر شو اما این دفعه بیا ما تو حساب میکنیم. نه.
Afghanistan has a history of regional warlords controlling parts of the country and people having loyalty to their tribe. Barakzai believes this social and political structure hinders the growth of democracy in the country.
امیدوارم مردم افغانستان هم از این مصلحت‌ها دیر شوند و از خیمه‌های کونه و تنگی که دیگه به درد ملت و به درد خودشان نمیخوره و نام قوم و زبان و مذهب خود بیرون بکشن، بیاین به عنوان یک کسی که در یک سرزمین زندگی میکنه به یک تصمیم برسه که او تصمیم حاکمیت قانون، رفاه، صلح، ثبات و امنیت باشه. معلوم دار راهی که اگر امیر راه 6 ساله خود لااقل ما تعقیب کنیم بریم به هیچ جای نمیرسیم.
Today, illegal processing in Afghanistan has made drugs cheaper and more available within the country. The result is that, increasingly, Afghans themselves are succumbing to the dangers of the country's largest cash crop. A recent United Nations survey puts the number of heroin addicts throughout the country at 50,000. That's in addition to 150,000 people who use opium. Poverty and unemployment are two causes of drug abuse. But in Afghanistan, there's another reason.
During the past quarter century, so many conflicts against the Soviet, against one another, the Mujahideen civil war period, the Taliban rules and the fight against the Taliban, all of this has created a context whereby people, especially internally displaced people, especially refugees, finding themselves in dire conditions, and some of them started to use opium as a way of just forgetting the daily chores and the daily difficulties and tragedies in life.
Drug addiction, unfortunately, has come to Afghanistan, mainly as a consequence of our being refugees in our neighboring countries. It ruins families. It's something that worries me a lot. It's something that we have not yet done much, unfortunately.
Many of the country's addicts picked up their habit elsewhere. In neighboring Pakistan or Iran, where per capita heroin use is the highest in the world. Among them, 39-year-old Abdurrahman, who struggled 12 years with addiction. His life reveals a growing trend in a country where domestic drug abuse was once virtually unknown. Realizing how his addiction affected his family, Abdurrahman quit using heroin. He is very firm about his outlook on those working in the illegal drug trade.
کسی که این کار میکنه اون اصلا مسلمان نیست، زاده این خاک نیست، بر ضد مردم، بر ضد جوانای این وطن، بر ضد جهان طور یک عیانه که از اساما اون بدتر است.
Abdurrahman escaped from the web of addiction, but many Afghans still struggle. North of the Hindu Kush in Afghanistan is where the Central Asian steppes begin, a flat, grassy plain that stretches hundreds of miles into Russia. In Balkh province, farming and herding still prevail as a way of life. Today, the province is poppy-free, the result of the government's rigor. The UNODC
کاهش دردشان است و عدم دسترسی به خدمات صحی باعث از این
30 miles. Opium also serves another purpose for rug.
است یک تراژدی انسانی که یک طفل هیچ گناهی نداره که او معتاد شود، او احتیاط کسب کنه و تجربه که ما در این ساحه دارم و کارهایی که در این ساحه ما کردیم این برای من نشان داده که مادرات و عدم آگاهی از ضرر مواد مخدر یا از ضرر تریاک یا اوپیوم و اونمو هست که طفل که هیچ گناهی نداره و گناهی از این اونمو هست که جامعه فقیری مثل افغانستان، جامعه که سطح آگاهی مردم آنقدر بلند نیست که از ضرر مواد مخدر بفهمند که اولاد خود که بسیار دوست داشتنی می باشن و زندگی راحت داشته باشن، زندگی عاری از مواد مخدر داشته باشن.
It's also a threat to the world community, and solutions must extend beyond Afghanistan's borders.
On supply.
A UN assessment for 2008 found in the country.
کلا مامورا خیلی به پرپاتون نمیپیچن.
حالا نکنی نه. کاری نداره. نهایتش اینه.
اولین بار
residents died. Months later, 3 well-known
هم برای خودمون بهتره، برای سلامت خودمون بهتره. همینه که دیگه آسیبی به جامعه نمیرسونه.
But that seems impossible in an Islamic theocracy like Iran. The women who try to earn a living this way must do so in the shadows, with all the dangers that entails.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the Babin, I pay my rent. On the Babin, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
Hello and welcome to this edition of our program, Timeless Conversations. Today, my guest is someone who has played such a significant role in the development of hip-hop music in Nigeria, which has actually now transformed into what is popularly called Afro beats with the S. You understand me? And today he's functioning not directly as a practicing musician, and we'll get into that, but he's functioning as an administrator of sorts in the world of music. He is currently the president of the Performing Musicians Association of Nigeria, PMAN. Let's welcome together Pretty Okafor.
Thank you so much.
How are you
Thank
doing?
you for having me. I'm good.
Nice to see you. If you recall, there was a duo called Junior and Pretty back in the day, and they caught the nation by storm. Their music was very original. Their songwriting was simple, direct, and everyday. Nigerians related to it. There was one of their major hits. There was Monica Monica. And then after that was Bolanle. But I'm going to ask him a question now. How were you able to cope with the loss of your brother, friend, colleague, Junior?
It wasn't easy. I think till date it still affected me because we started as teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Our first album were teenagers.
Yes.
With the Monica Monica thing, and so that means we grew up as children till when we became teenagers and to adulthood. So we've known each other for close to like 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're used to combining in the craft of songwriting.
Yeah.
Creating rhymes. We were the first people that started creating rhymes from our local content and all that.
Yes.
So the encouragement, may he so rest in peace. When Junior left, the encouragement wasn't there anymore. But I had so much responsibilities to handle. I had to now look after his family, my family, and the extended family. So it was a huge tax. But I thank God I survived it.
Mm. Yeah, one of the things that happened to you was that you went quiet, very quiet, and you look quiet naturally. So
I'm quiet.
Yeah. So you went quiet.
No, not really. I didn't go quiet. Like I said, I had to concentrate on building companies because Junior wasn't around. So making money from what we were doing, because from playing the concerts, we started producing and anchoring Benson & Hedges Golden Tones.
Yes,
you
I remember that.
So we're still doing that when he had that crash and passed. So I woke up one day, I just got irritated or frustrated, and I resigned. I don't want to work with.
That's going quiet.
Eh?
That's going quiet.
Yeah, but I went quiet, now concentrating, paying attention to build companies, to build structure
So what companies were you building?
Okay, I was building Pretty Boy Entertainment. Pretty Boy Entertainment is the biggest. Pretty Boy Entertainment used to produce Mega Jam.
Okay.
So built Pretty Boy Entertainment, built Red Worldwide, and a whole lot. Red Worldwide is a marketing communication agency. So I was paying attention, building all those structures, making money anyway, so I could look after.
You could satisfy the responsibilities.
Responsibilities
that falling on you.
Yeah, and again, also remember at that era, they weren't making much money. We weren't making much money like this. This youths are making now. So you had to do a whole lot and pay attention, be focused to succeed in those things.
You guys were first striking at the glass ceiling. These guys shattered it.
Yeah. So you could say we prepared the path for them to excel, and that's why till today I get excited. I'm happy with what is happening with our music scene and the growth.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, you know, having seen what you did back in the day, how do you feel with the exponential growth that could only have been dreamt up back then?
I'm sure wherever Junior is, he's very, very excited, because while we were 1989, 1990, while we were working seriously to build this same genre of music, what we wanted to do was how can we surpass the growth of reggae music. We're in Nigeria, so every other brand of music is excelling, but no one has crossed Nigeria or crossed Africa. But reggae was everywhere.
Reggae came from everywhere.
Yes, so we wanted to create a genre that can beat reggae. Though it didn't happen while we were still performing, but it has happened now.
Yes.
Like I said, John is very, very happy wherever he is. And I'm excited because what we planned, like I keep telling people, what happened to Afrobeat now was a predetermined progress. It was a predetermined structure that me and Junior built. We were chasing it. But again, if you're building something, I learned it with experience, if you're building something that is fantastic, you might not be the one that will take it.
It doesn't usually happen like that.
So where the music industry is now, I'm excited, I'm proud. I keep telling it to everybody, just do what you can do, that is your part, and the rest will take care of itself.
I'll take up one thing you said. You said something about collaborative songwriting, right? Between you and Junior in his lifetime. Is there the hope that the songwriting segment of the performing arts would be built up to international standards where people can write songs, give to somebody, license to somebody else to sing, and then they make money from it? Or they just have to keep selling?
No. It's already happening.
It is?
It is already happening. Like, luckily, I'm the president of the Performing Musicians Employers Association of Nigeria. Now, PMAN is not a music association. It's a trade union. It's the only trade union in creative industry.
Okay.
It's entertainment industry. So now going through that and also working, like a whole lot of people like, okay, we know pretty what he can do. We try to portray and push forward where songwriters are making money, composers are making money.
Okay.
They are splitting revenues when it comes to royalties. So now if you write song, you don't just write and they pay you off. You write and share split royalties. There's a split contract.
Okay.
So once that song start raking in billions, trillions,
no, you cannot start with thousands.
Yes, but you start making money. So there's a whole lot of the songwriters now that don't just write song and they pay them 1 peanut. They write song and they do a contract.
Okay.
They can also pay them money, but they do a contract, and the contract is the split sheet contract that they will do with the artist. So once the song goes viral, the songwriter is also making money.
Is also making money, which brings me to this point, and that is that there used to be this issue of royalty, collection of royalty and all that. And recently, I think MCSN has been recognized as the only collecting society in the country licensed to operate within the country. Is PMAN part of that, or how does that impact PMAN and its members?
First, if getting into the system, and knowing what the structure of PMAN or authority of PMAN is, if PMAN does not agree, have a contract with you, you cannot collect from musicians.
Okay.
That's one thing for sure. So what MCSN is doing, because there's an agreement between PMAN and MCSN to collect for our members.
Okay.
And because we're a trade union, for our member means whether registered or non-registered musicians. So MCSN is actually the ones that are licensed right now to collect royalties for musicians, and PMAN supervises that collection. PMAN makes sure that the corporate bodies pay. MCSN collects, and MCSN distributes to the members, to the owners of the rights. Of the rights, yeah.
Okay. Now, the process of collection should suggest that there's some level of registration, and you seem to have alluded to it when you said that whether you are a registered member or unregistered member.
That's for PMAN. That's for PMAN.
Yeah, I'm going to PMAN. So how does PMAN ensure that all musicians register?
Now, if you don't have to be a PMAN member before releasing a song. That's our work is to monitor that structure, that scene, that music, and music entrepreneurship and music performance. That's what we do. So, but to collect your royalties. Now, they've been collecting royalties. Some of them don't register in Nigeria, some of them register outside.
Outside, yes.
But first, to collect your royalties, which is not your master royalties, is your mechanical royalties, your performance royalties, your digital royalties, or your needle time. We call it neighboring right royalty, but it's needle time royalty for you and your members. For you to collect that, you need a CMO, a copyright management organization, to be able to collect that. And for you to collect that and register in your account, you need to be a member of the CMO.
Okay. In this instance,
MCSN.
MCSN.
You need to be a member because MCSN has a reciprocal agreement with other CMOs around the world.
Around the world. Okay.
So when they collect rights of Nigerian musicians and all that, they channel it to MCSN. MCSN collects it from them and distributes. So for you to get your money in Nigeria, not just collecting in South Africa or in Ghana or that, to collect it from Nigeria, you need to be a registered member of MCSN.
Okay, so that's MCSN. Now, PMAN. Is membership open to anyone who is into music, or who is an instrumentalist, or who is what? And how does that